Good afternoon. Today we're going to take a little tour of our almost complete MZ TS250 drag bike. Let's start at the front end here. I'll give a little history of the machine here and how I've been cobbling this together over the past 3 years of various spare parts sourced from as far away as Greece and from as close as Concord, which is only a 15-minute drive. So, front end, meaning the forks, fork tree, handlebars, it's all original. This is original front wheel. I relaced both the front and back wheel with new spokes. They came to me in rather sorry condition, but I was able to get new spokes in there. The brakes were all good, unused. This bike, from as far as I can tell, the front end and the engine came from a bike that was wrecked after 17 miles because the original front forks were bent really bad. So I got another set of forks, but the rest of it was intact. Headlight bucket was good, fork ears are good, speedometer. If you can look closely, you see it's only got 17 miles on the odometer there. This bike didn't live very long before it was killed. So the motor I got was that 17-mile motor. Had almost nothing on it when I got it, so it was a good place to start. So anyway, whole front end is original. I took the fender off. It's bulky and heavy. I think it looks better without it, and you don't really need a fender for drag racing. So headlight bucket is of course empty. I'm only leaving it down there so it looks like an MZ. That's dead weight. It's probably going to end up coming off if I really want to get this thing up to my target speed. See, cables. I got these cables from a gentleman named Roger out in Youngstown who had a set of NOS MZ cables, all 4 of them. Brand new, never been put on a bike. He ordered them from an MZ dealer way back in the day when they were still being imported. They were still wrapped up in the packaging. So they're all going back on. The brake cable, clutch cable, throttle cable are all original MZ made in East Germany. Gas tank I got from my buddy MZ Tony. Pretty sure it was pretty crappy on the inside. Didn't have any side panels. I can't find side panels for them, at least not in good condition. So I just cut some out of aluminum. I got some badges from, I think, MZ Tony. That's what I call him. His name is Tony, but he's the only other person I know who owns an MZ. And he sold me those badges, and I put them on the side and just cut these out. There's the famous gas cap. And what else is original? The frame is completely original, unmolested. I have not cut it or welded or drilled a hole in it. It's the original frame. That came directly from Germany. I traded a couple of one restored Ducati 125 and one unrestored Ducati 125 to this fellow down the road who travels to and from Germany for work. I told him that if he could find me a TS250 frame and bring it back from Germany, I would give him both of those Ducatis. He was a Ducati fan, and 3 weeks later, the guy calls me up, and he has a TS250 frame in his garage. It was never built into a bike. It still had the number plate right here, like zip tied to it with like a twisty wire, and it was still hanging there. These usually go up here in the headstock, and they're riveted on. This wasn't even put on yet. The bolts that were in here were the ones from the paint booth. They had layers and layers of yellow, blue, red, and black paint on because they've been using the MZ spray booth for all these years as they painted frames and various items to block off the suspension holes. So the frame has never had a motor mounted to it until now. It's a brand new frame. The swing arm is an original swing arm with a 12-inch extension by me. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to go with an aluminum one. My buddy's going to make one for me, and I give him the dimensions. Rear wheel, also original MZ, untouched, unused. I put new bearings in it, new spokes. Fender, I have no idea where this is from. Somebody gave it to me, and I just made it work. Put a little bracket on it. It's aluminum, lightweight. Doesn't do much, probably doesn't even have to be there. Seat is actual MZ seat. I'm thinking of making a custom one, more suitable for drag racing, but I mean, this is a 250. I don't expect it to throw you out of the seat backwards, but you know, every little bit helps, and safety first, you know. So that's all that is unchanged. Like I said, handlebars are original MZ. These are the low drag bars. Clutch and brake lever are also original MZ. I got this whole setup in one piece and kept it that way. So what I've added, we have a Skidoo racing tachometer. This is pretty neat. It works. It says a 12-volt internal battery. You can order it in various configurations, but I got a 12-volt internal battery. You can charge it up, and it's good for like 10, 12 hours, which for drag racing, that's a whole season. And So all I do is pull this out and that activates it. And you also charge it through that same port. There's a little 1/8" jack, and they give you a neat little connector. You just hook it up to a 12-volt battery, charge it overnight, you're good to go. It doesn't even need an external source, and all you do is tape the lead wire from the tachometer onto your spark plug wire, like that, and it picks up the sparks and gives you your readout. They came to me highly recommended, and I gotta say, the item appears to be very high quality. I ordered it and got it in about a month. They're made to order, so they don't just buy them off the shelf. You got to give them all kinds of particulars, how many RPMs you want, what type of battery power you want, etc. And then they make it for you and send it out. And I was very impressed, and so far so good. And I have an AFR gauge, which is air fuel ratio, uses an oxygen sensor that is mounted next to the exhaust gas temperature gauge, EGT in other words, and that tells you how hot your exhaust gases are. So side by side, you can really dial this thing in with that bit of information along with the tachometer. And I haven't mounted the actual sensor yet. It should go somewhere around here. I think I'm going to put it there. But there you can see there's the O2 sensor mounted in the fattest part of the spanny chamber. I mean, there's a lot of debate about whether or not an O2 sensor does any good in this two-stroke because it gets fouled by, you know, the two-stroke oil and blah, blah, blah. But I anticipate cleaning and replacing this thing fairly frequently if I want to get an accurate read. And of course, if you see, you know, huge deviations in readings under similar circumstances, chances are it's dirty and not giving you an accurate read. But this was advised to me by somebody with decades of experience in two-stroke racing, so I'm going to go with his advice. He also said to buy the EGT. These are pretty cool. This thing actually heats the temp sensor, or the O2 sensor, and tells you as it's heating up. It'll show you it'll climb and tell you when it's ready to go. If you run it before it's high, you mess up the sensor. So this thing has a built-in heater, runs off 12-volt battery, and then the EGT gauge is also just gloriously simple. I got this from Summit Racing, and I got this from the Sensor Connection. Both of them were highly recommended and they were excellent customer service on both ends. Very happy with the product so far. So, surprising how simple it is to really put one of these together, because you don't have to worry about generator. I'm doing what they call total loss ignition, which means you just have a battery and you run the battery dead. It's a drag bike. You're running it for maybe a minute and a half, so who cares? You got a battery, you charge it up every time you run. You gotta let the cylinder head cool anyway between runs. You got plenty of time to charge up a little battery. So here's a coil mounted on the original MZ coil bracket mount. I had to make a new bracket, and I have to kind of pad that out. It's still a little loose. I have to put some rubber in there to shock mount it. But other than that, it's pretty simple. I just got this cheap ignition coil from a nearby auto parts store, wired it up to the points breaker, which is a Honda points breaker. I just bought a generic one. And then I got a points cam, ironically enough, from a Suzuki. I was able to cut the taper in it and fit it to the end of the crankshaft, and had someone build me a little standoff. I made a points plate, and it works. It gives me a good fast spark when I kick it over. And going back further, of course, the exhaust pipe is anything but factory. It was designed by my engine expert who did all my porting and engine modifications, and I made it myself here in the garage. There's videos about that. I think it's actually one of my most popular videos is the video about that, making the exhaust pipes. So that had been fastened to the original MZ mount under here, which you can't see, but that's for the actual exhaust pipe mounts. And I welded a bracket on there, and underneath the seat here we have fuse block and our battery we're going to use. This is a 3.2 amp hour 12.5 volt battery. It's a lithium polymer, more commonly found in remote control model aircraft. That's exactly what it was for. I have an airplane that takes this battery, but this is perfect. It's 12 volts. It's 30 capacity discharge. You can discharge it up to like 90 amps, more than 90 amps. Everything here combined does not draw even 10 amps. So you have probably a good 20 minutes of runtime at 10 amps, maybe 12 minutes. If you're going at 12 amps, about 15 minutes of runtime according to the math. So there's no way I'm killing this battery and run down the track. And each element up here is fused to this panel. I know they're 30 amp fuses now. They're supposed to be a 5, a 1, and maybe a 5 or 10 for the ignition system. But I didn't have any extra, so I just put 30 amps in there to test it. So when you hit this little switch here, it turns on the whole rig, including the ignition, and you will see our gauges. This is pretty cool. And you see heat. It's heating up. Look at that. It gets warm. And as soon as your O2 sensor is warm enough to provide accurate readings, it will begin reading. And it says green, 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 and then it's going to go to all the way lean right there because there's no gas in there right now. It's reading nothing but oxygen, so it's totally maxed out. And here's our exhaust gas temperature sensor, which, as I mentioned, isn't plugged in. It's reading 78 degrees, which is about how warm it is in the garage right now. So you can see that's definitely accurate and functional. And I can attest from earlier experiments that my ignition system does work. I do generate spark with kickover. So everything's run back here in this little cubby hole. I got to tie my wires up a little better. But all in all, pretty easy to throw together. I mean, I've been at this project for several years, but mostly waiting for engine modifications. I've been waiting for me to get off my butt and just start putting things together. I'm probably not going to use these shocks. They're heavy, and I can just do struts and have a similar performance. I don't think the shocks are going to help any, but we'll find out. I'm rather new to this whole drag racing thing. And that's about it. The engine modifications were covered in an early video, but you can see this is definitely not an original MZ cylinder head. And a little bit more irony here for Suzuki parts. That's a Suzuki spark plug cap right there. And the hose clamp I had to make here is from a Suzuki as well. Both of them are from a GT750, which is that blue bike over there. But don't tell anybody who likes MZs that I'm using Suzuki parts on the bike. And so yeah, it's a pretty neat machine. I'm going to probably have it started up in another week or two. Hopefully next week. All I really need to do is put some gas in it and it'll kick over. I don't have any oil in the gearbox yet, but I'm going to put some in there. But as you can see, it's already a puddle of oil beneath it. I mean, I could make an anvil leak oil, but I just had only thumb tightened the drain plug there, and there's assembly oil in the gearbox, so that trickled down to the bottom and drained out. So of course the thing, typical old bike, leaks oil immediately, even if it has no oil in it. But that should all be taken care of. And that's about it. I'm not going to use the gas tank to hold gas. I'm going to put like a little pop can sized container of fuel down there because you don't need that much, and the less weight the better. So I'm going to start trimming the fat if I really want this thing to go fast, because this is not a bike that was ever meant to go fast. But we're going to see what we can do with it. All right, folks. Cheers, and stay tuned if you want to see the results of this long drawn out and rather pointless but immensely entertaining experiment.